We are on lesson number 9. I too can create desolation. I want to make an observation today, something really I think was just the way that the Lord works, and I'll explain what I mean by that in just a minute. When I first put together these notes, it had to be probably at least 3 months ago. I wanted to talk about mirroring. Mirroring. Does anyone think that they can tell me what mirroring is?
Doing the same as.
Copy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the definition, the technical definition of mirroring is the behavior in which one person subconsciously imitates the gesture, speech pattern, or attitude of another. And so it doesn't even have to be conscious. This is not something like you're saying, okay, I'm going to imitate them. This is something unique and different. It's still imitation. You're doing the same things, but you're not even fully aware of it. And the way this often presents itself is the way, again, that we understand culturally what relationships work like within healthy families. You all have mirrored your parents. Even as we're talking about in our essays with our moms, like some attributes that we want to emulate in their life, chances are you've already done a lot of that just by nature of being around them. There might be things that you say, words that you use, phrases that are connected to your families. In fact, if we probably spent some time, we could analyze each different unique family dynamic, and we could talk about things that are like most prevalent that are said in one household versus another. There's styles in which we learn, and there's things that we do together that are more, we can even go down to like traditions or things. And so mirroring is this thing that takes place without us being aware of it, where we are reflecting back that which we have been born into. Now, this is why I think it is of particular note that the Lord, again, is speaking to us. Brother Emmanuel, earlier today, sent out an email to the group, and the title on this email is A Mirror of His Heart. It says this: when you look in the mirror at yourself, what do you see? I recently looked in the mirror and the Lord challenged me. He said, how do you see yourself? How do others see you? He continued to speak about the mirror, saying, I desired for the world to see that you are a mirror reflecting me, for this is a time of divine moments of replacement of that which is out of place and displaced. I am aligning and refining relationships to be made whole as they see themselves as I see them, says the Lord. Now, isn't this exactly what we are talking about? The outcast, the creature that has been displaced, who is mirroring what? He's mirroring every negative tendency that he has experienced from Victor. Subconsciously, he's taken this in, right? This rejection, this difficulty, this being an outcast, this not having a place to fit within the world, this not having love, it's not having affection. And so he's here, the creature is really struggling. Now, as we find ourselves in the story, we've got to remember that this, as we're reading it, this is not events that are happening in real time. This is the creature telling the story of what has happened in the past to Victor. And so when we are confronted, right, with the creature, the monster, the demon, grabbing up young William and choking the life out of him, we've got to remember that what has Victor already experienced? He's already experienced the reality of finding out that his brother was dead and going and mourning that. And now he's revisiting it again. He's experiencing it a second time, but now he's getting the actual details into what happened. Last week I shared with you, there is within clinical circles or psychological circles a statement that says this, and I'll write it down. It can be very profound. Hurt people. Does anyone remember?
Hurt people.
Hurt people. The reason this is profound is that has anyone ever considered or wondered, why did that person hurt me? Why did they say that? Why did they do that? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Have you ever been hurt by someone and it just doesn't make any sense in your mind why they would do that? Well, this is the reason why. People who have been hurt And they may not even be fully aware that they've been hurt, right? We've all experienced things, like I think we can all be honest about, like maybe we lash out or we say something and we're like, whoa, where did that come from? Well, it's because in our hearts there's been some level of hurt, challenge, difficulty, trauma, however you want to compartmentalize it. And so when we are hurt by other people, what that generally means is that has come from a place that is not from that person, per se. Oftentimes, we don't hurt people intentionally. In fact, anyone who has at least some level of moral compass doesn't set out to hurt people. Now, there are certainly people in the world who are just vile and evil, and their intentions are very, very clear. But generally speaking, right, we would not seek to hurt one another. And yet we have the capacity, do we not, within us, to hurt one another in the things that we say and the things that we do or the things that we don't do? Is that fair to say that we all have the capacity to hurt one another, right? We have siblings. Anyone ever been hurt by something their sibling said? Have you ever been the sibling that said something that has hurt someone? Right? And so we have to begin to understand and wrestle with this a little bit because, again, maybe where we were last week, I think pretty heavily last week when we did the show of hands on, is it a creature, a monster, or a demon, we fell on the side of creature, right? So let's reevaluate where we are this week. How many of you say he's a demon? How many of you would say monster? How many of you would say still creature? Okay, so we've had a pretty significant shift to where we're 50-50. We're kind of wrestling, which is he here? But what we can identify with is that the things he is doing are a mirror, a reflection, subconscious reflection of what he is experiencing. This is where he gets to this saying. If you have your books, if you can open them up to page 144. This is towards the very end of the chapter here. This is just as we are experiencing him tell his story about the murder of William. He says, "Boy, you will never see your father again. You must come with me. Hideous monster, let me go. My papa is a syndic. He is Monsieur Frankenstein. He will punish you. You dare not keep me." Now, there's no way that William could have known that this is the very thing that will lead to his untimely demise, right? The threats that he is making. "Frankenstein, you belong then to my enemy, to him towards whom I have sworn eternal revenge. You shall be my first victim." The child still struggled and loaded me with epithets which carried despair to my heart. And so what the creature here is identifying with is the very things that William is saying at this point is going to the deepest places of him, right? What he is seeing in this little boy now is not William anymore. It's not a little boy. And that's why he can then snuff out life. What he is seeing is every vile accusation that has come at him at the hands of his father, Victor. And so in many ways, William here is mirroring these things that Victor has accused the creature of. "I grasped at his throat to do what? To silence him." Strangled him, yeah. But let's be clear about the word usage that the creature uses. What is his intention, or his verbalized intention?
He wanted him to stop. He wanted him to be quiet, to shut up.
He's trying to stop the words that are a dagger to his soul. Now, this is where, again, it's intentional on the author's part, where we have to wrestle with this. Is this intentional? Did the monster seek to kill him? Because there's evidence for that. Or is this accidental? Or does it really even matter? So we have to answer all of those questions through the information that's presented and wrestle with this again, because now the lines aren't so clean between creature and monster. If we say monster, what makes him a monster? Is it just the fact that he killed? Do we not give a thought or consideration to the intention? right? And if we say creature, we have to wrestle with he did kill. And so are we giving more weight to maybe the reasoning behind it?
The reason I put him as creature is actually similar to what's going on in this book. If man, there's two ways it could work. If man abused the creature and creature abused man, they could both be labeled as monster, or they could both be labeled as creature. So, same as if a man murdered another man, he would not be called a monster. He'd be called a murderer, but not a monster. Not even a creature to that equivalent. But if this creature murdered a person, they would be labeled as monster or demon.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is still murder, so if you're saying that's a monster and a demon, you're calling men monsters and demons.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the kind of the answer we're left with, right? Is morally how would we define this? Yeah.
Sorry. I was just thinking, I would be more on the monster side, not because I do feel sympathetic and wish it was different, because I think the way Mary Shelley wrote it was you want to feel sympathetic, you really are all, oh, this poor thing has been rejected by its father, but also I come to think of it, he didn't mean he didn't necessarily try to kill William, but it doesn't say oh my goodness, I felt so much regret. He didn't really care. He was like, you're my enemy. Tries to silence him, kills him, and then's all. Well, there's no true
Yeah. Well, let's continue. I grasped his throat to silence him, and in a moment he lay dead at my feet. I gazed on my victim, and my heart swelled with exultation and hellish triumph. Okay, now we have a response that's here. Now we have a deeper response to the creature is feeling good and triumphant. But let's keep some perspective here. Do you think he's triumphant because he has killed the boy? Or do you think he is triumphant because he is going to extend back to Victor, to mirror to Victor what he has experienced from him? You see, I think the whole context of William is kind of the wrong place at the wrong time type of a situation. This really has nothing to do with William in and of itself. William represents the pain that Victor will endure. Clapping my hands, I exclaimed, I too can create desolation. My enemy, who's his enemy? Victor. My enemy is not invulnerable. This death will carry despair to him, and 1,000 other miseries shall torment and destroy him. Okay, so let's pause there, because again, we can take multiple sides to that, right? We certainly see here that the verbiage that he uses is not good verbiage. Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a thought. I think that it's a creature, but he was acting like a monster.
A creature acting like a monster. That's a good way to look at it. I think in that light, you could use this analogy, right? If you came up upon an injured dog, wounded dog, and you began to touch its wound and you got bit, who would be at fault for that?
you.
Well, why not the dog?
Because you were touching it.
You were touching it, right? So, well, William wasn't doing anything very different, right? The creature here is a wounded animal. So again, I'm playing kind of both sides here on purpose, because we need to analyze this. We really need to consider this, because that's the reality of the situation we're put in. On one side of the equation, it's hard for us to really come down on the creature, because the creature doesn't know any better. It is the equivalent of a wounded animal. And what is the response from a wounded animal? Well, hurt people hurt people. Again, the creature has no cultural context for what it means to repent. Why? Because that's not been offered to him through the life of Victor, right? Victor never once. And by this time in the conversation, has not Victor had every opportunity to interject and say, I'm sorry, you're right. I've done wrong. Now that doesn't change the events. And so again, it's almost like we have to break this up apart a little bit, right? There has to be accountability for the actions of the person. But there also needs to be understanding to why people do the things they do. Now the reason I'm bringing this up is because I want us to consider the course and the manner of our life when we are hurt or wounded by other people. Do we take the side of, in our heart, that they were wrong and that they should have never done that? Or do we take the side of attempting to understand why that happened? See, most of us don't want to consider the heart behind it. Yeah, go ahead, Kate.
What I just realized is that in the Bible it says do not murder, and murdering, it also says in the Bible that murdering would also be the equivalent of murdering someone with your words, or I don't know how to explain that but exactly, but which mean or thoughts or actions towards someone. So that means man would have the same equivalent and accountability to a murder as physical, and actually possibly even more, because an emotional destruction is worse than physical, and because in physical it's over, you're not going to feel pain, but emotional, it will be dragging throughout your life and slowly tear you to pieces like torture, rather than a quick or even a painful death.
Yeah, it's easy in many ways to heal from physical wounds. How many of you remember this when you were a kid? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will
Always hurt.
They will always hurt. Yeah, that's the truth of it. What we say will never hurt me, right? That's such a silly thing. And yet what we know to be true is that there's power in the tongue, right? The things that are said, there's a weight there. And what we experience emotionally, to Caden's point, what we experience at the words or the sharp tongue. And again, I want us to put this, let's get it personal for a second here. How do we respond when people hurt us? How do we respond?
Should we, or how do we?
How do we respond? Because I'll tell you what we generally, I would say predominantly how we respond is we do what? We mirror. We mirror. See, if we're not intentional in our responses, we will mirror back that which we're given. Right? This is, like, we all know this is true. Right? We all know that if somebody says something to me that I don't like, and it's unguarded in a moment, what is coming out of my mouth before I even have a chance to filter it is right back at you. Right? I'm rubber, you're glue. That's the saying, right? It bounces off. There's a mirroring effect. This is why for you and I, we must be very, very intentional about how we receive things from others and what we allow to pass through the gates of our heart. Jesus, by the way, demonstrated this on the cross. When he's hanging on the cross, he says to his Father, now again, the weight of all mankind's sin for all of eternity is on his shoulders. And not just that, but Jesus by this time knows full well that it was the Father's purpose and intention to put him there. And so this was intentional on the Father's. So Jesus knows that the Father is going to intentionally even look away from him in that moment. So with anticipation to Jesus feeling the full weight of being disconnected from the Father for the first time, not just in our human history, but from eternity. And Jesus says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. See, this is a deeply profound thing. See, what if we operated from the assumption that other people are doing things to us and have hurt us, not because they fully knew well, which is that's a mirroring. They knew better. It's a way we protect ourselves, our ego, self-preservation. What if we instead considered that what that person doing was not intentional, or necessarily wasn't even something they had even considered? What if we operated from a position in our heart of real forgiveness, which doesn't seek to fix agenda or judgment from the other person. It just seeks to do what? To release the other person. Now think about the profundity of this. Jesus is saying, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. Jesus never says that what they were doing was right. He just doesn't get himself caught up in it. He's not trying to argue again that, well, it's not fair. No, he says, Father, forgive them. As one who knows that they didn't do it on purpose. In this way, forgive them. Now, again, our tendency in the fallen state of man is towards vengeance. Romans 12:19 says this. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. In other words, whose job is it to repay? It's the Lord's. He gets to be in charge of how people are ultimately disciplined and when they are disciplined. And yet we so clearly at times want others to feel the wrath. Let's just be honest. In our fallen nature, when somebody hurts us, don't we just at least on some measure want them to feel what we feel, to know what we experience? But leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. You see, what we have to be very, very clear about, no matter where we side on the definition, monster, creature, demon, what we have to be very, very clear of is that there was no capacity for him to culturally understand what it means to be good when faced with evil. And that should, in many ways, break our hearts. Continue to break our hearts for the creature. It does not justify the actions of the creature. And this is where we really struggle, right? Because we want to attach them both together. We don't want to be able, it's hard for us to separate out the things that a person does with who the person really is. And we got to ask ourselves, who is this creature? What are they really? Are they really the image and the reflection of Victor? And if that's the case, what do we think about Victor? I mean, how many of us like Victor? Does anyone like Victor here? Well, then we have to ask ourselves, if you don't like Victor, why don't you like Victor? Why don't we like Victor?
Because he won't own up to anything.
Because he won't own up.
He made bad decisions without thinking about it first.
He made bad decisions without thinking about it.
And then he didn't take ownership for his bad decisions.
And then he didn't take ownership, right? But let me ask you this: Who in this story that she's writing, who is she trying to get the author to see that they are like? See, most of us want to read this story and think we're like the creature. Man, we've been rejected and we've been hurt and we've been wounded, and so we've had to do certain things and it's been rough. That's called a victim mentality, and I can identify with it because I've been a victim. I know what it's like to walk in victimhood. It's stupid. It's foolish. It's a waste of time. And I had legitimate reasons to play the part of the victim. Right? You guys know my story. That story could get me sympathy. Poor Justin. Right? He had it worse. And there's such immaturity in walking in that identity. Right? We don't need to be victims to the circumstances of our lives. The author wanted us to identify with and understand that we have the capacity to be Victor. No one wants to hear that. No one wants to come to the point in discussion to say, no, in fact, you are victor. That's who you are in this story. You're the victor. Yay, I'm the victor, I win. Nope, not that kind of victor. You're the one who creates things that you don't take responsibility for, that you don't cultivate and culture in a proper understanding, and you put things out into the world without fully considering the weight of what it is that you're doing. Well, that's a bummer. Yep. But then furthermore, once we have done the thing, right, whatever it is that we put out there, if we're not careful, we can continue to avoid taking responsibility for it. This is where the opportunity we have, right? We always have an opportunity in God's creation, right? He has always given mankind an opportunity to do what? To repent, to turn away. This starts, by the way, in the Garden of Eden, when, and again, the creature uses this language, right, of being thy Adam, right? So Adam does what? He sins. They eat the fruit and they fall away, and God visits them in the garden, and God offers himself to them and says, where are you? And this is God trying to draw them back into what? The context of relationship. Where I say, right here, I was hiding, and this is why I was hiding. I ate the fruit from the tree, the serpent came, this is how it all went down, I was wrong. And that's not what happens. What happens is Adam gets found out, and then he's covered himself up, and then he looks at God and says, well, the reason I did this was because you gave me the woman. He doesn't take any responsibility. And so again, we can't be surprised that the things that we create that are unhealthy, that we haven't really thought through. We can't be surprised when those things revisit us and they're uglier than we had anticipated they might be. And so we see that ultimately, what is the creature looking for? He's looking to be a mirror image of something. The creature is longing for a father. Whether you know it or not now, let's take let's take earthly fathers out of the equation, because we all have different examples on where our earthly fathers are on the scale. But what your heart has been longing for all time, man's heart has been longing for a father. In a real relationship, that the culture of God as Father is translated to the heart of mankind as sons. We know that because the Bible says that that's true. There's many people in the world who have no clue. By the way, one of the greatest epidemics in America right now that has everything to do with all of our problems. You want to solve the problem of homelessness, you want to solve the problem of teenage pregnancy, of drug use, all of it. Their studies have proven this time and time again. You restore the position of father back to a household, and you will alleviate all of these problems. And that's just solving the problem by adding a earthly father to the equation. How much more so if you and I fully embrace and understand that what we have been given is vastly different than the creature. What we've been given is even vastly different than Victor, because Victor had what? Had a good earthly father. He didn't learn the lessons he should have from his father. Remember at the very start, what did he do? He left his father's home to pursue knowledge. That's the whole point, right? The danger of doing what? Intellectual pursuit. Why is that dangerous? Because what he had, relational understanding, relational quotient, RQ, what he had with his father, Alphonse, was the very thing he needed to live a stable life. And instead, he rips himself away from it, and he creates something for himself, and then he does what? He runs away from the creature as well. All of these things are now culminating in this story. And then we get to this really significant point, right? Let's look at chapter 9 now on page 147. the being, this is really interesting to me, right? We've said creature, we've said monster, we've said demon. We now have a fourth option. Being. Now why is this significant? Because really, there's not any label being offered here. Victor is so disassociated with what's going on that he uses the most generic terminology he could use. Just being. Something that is. The being finished speaking and fixed his looks upon me in the expectation of a reply. Well, yeah. Don't you think he deserves some kind of reply? Like, even now, Victor is like, well, I don't really owe it to him to give him an answer. But I was bewildered, perplexed, and unable to arrange my ideas sufficiently. Again, Victor is operating out of his intellect. I got to figure out exactly how to say and when to say and what to say. And what does the being now want? Relationship. Anything. Relationship. To arrange my ideas sufficiently to understand the full extent of his proposition, he continued, "You must create a female for me with whom I can live in the interchange of those sympathies necessary for my being. This you alone can do." That's true, yeah? Victor is the only one who can do this for him. He is the only one who has the knowledge to bring about life. "And I demand it of you as a right which you must not refuse to concede." Even here, the creature, the being, the monster, the demon, is presenting Victor with what? A choice. And so as we read this week, I want you to ask this question before you read, and it'll be chapters 1 through 4 in volume 3. Would you create a female for the monster? If this request were coming from you, would you? Yes or no? Why? Why? And let's look at it from all angles, because let's not just assume. See, we have to first kind of flesh out, what do we think to be true here? Right? Because if I think that it's a demon, I don't want to create another demon. But if I consider it a monster, does that mean I'm creating another monster? Or if I think of it as a creature, does that mean I'm creating another? Like, how we define who the creature is will go a long ways in helping us try to understand how we would then respond here. But we need to flesh that out a little bit. We need to ask ourselves those questions again. Because let me ask you this. Is it unreasonable for the creature to ask for someone who is like him? This mimics what happens in the garden, right? All the animals were created by their kind. Male and female, he created them, right? Even Adam and Eve. And so it doesn't seem unreasonable for that request. Yeah.
I just have a couple things sort of as a question.
Sure.
It was making me think how Caden just a little while ago was like, well, if I were to kill someone, none of you would see me as a monster. But I think when you don't have like a father figure, and maybe I'm wrong, like when you don't have a father figure, I kind of lost it. Like, I don't know, like you would still love him if he were to do that. But the monster doesn't have anybody to love him, so he's considered a monster. I don't know why it made me think of that. And also, what was I going to say? I had a good question. I feel like we could do the same thing how we are doing creature, monster, or demon with Victor, because to be honest with you, I would put Victor as a monster as well. I think that what he has done to the creature is very, like, not innocent like you would say as a creature. And I think that's why the monster is mirroring Victor. He's mirroring Victor, so I feel like if we think that the monster is a creature, or the being, let me say, so I can use these. is a creature, monster, or demon, we also have to put Victor as the same place if he's mirroring off that.
Yes. It is the Father who gives the Son identity. Let me say that again. It is the Father who gives the Son identity. The creature responds the way he responds because he has not been given what? By the Father. The proper identity, the proper cultural understanding. It's the very reason why we see in the past few chapters why the creature went over to this family, right? And he looked on the outside and he was longing to be what? To be brought in by who? The Father. He goes even to the father of that family that's looking for what? The affirmation of a father to be adopted in. He never, ever, ever gets it. And so we're left at this crossroads where we must now wrestle with the fact that we know 100% for sure that there has been a murder. And we know 100% for sure that what is going to take place if he doesn't get his way, he is going to exact revenge on not just Victor, but all mankind. And so what would you do? Because one of the questions isn't just, do I create somebody who is like the creature? But there's this whole demand of like, if I don't, then what are the ramifications or the consequences? You notice how the stakes have been raised. He didn't really count the cost at all when he was creating the creature to begin with. Now he's forced to really count the cost and consider the choices he makes. Let's think about it. What happens if he flat out refuses? What is that going to look like?
He dies, people run him down.
Is that a guarantee? Yeah, we don't know, right? That could be one option. Victor could think, well, maybe he's just putting it on, right? Like he's not. But man, he's already killed the brother. Yeah, go ahead.
Victor actually tried to refuse, and the creature kept pleading with him.
Yeah.
So, but if he ultimately would not listen to the creature, then it'd be actually refusing again.
Yeah.
He was like, I know I will refuse. The creature's like, please listen to me, please.
Yeah.
I won't try to face humans ever again.
Right. And does the creature sound at that point? Does he sound desperate? Does he sound like he's willing to just leave everything behind with just him and his beloved?
He was like, I swear.
Right.
Please.
But the question is, can we trust him? Right. So even in that, like again, we want to identify and say, yeah, that sounds all well and good, but can we? It's an avowed murderer that said they enjoyed it. It's not so simple, is it? Again, we have in our hearts, we have answers that we would like to give. By the way, let me just remind you, we already know how the story ends, don't we? We do in large part. We have a lot of insight. Remember, the beginning of the story is the end of the story. What do we know to be true? Who is Victor chasing after? The creature.
Oh, yeah.
And why is Victor chasing after the creature?
He ran away.
He ran away. And what is Victor intending to do when he finds the creature?
Kill it.
Pretty clearly alluded to that he's trying to end its life, right? And so we already know, right, that what we have before us is a really daunting last section in the book to find out how does it end ultimately with Victor saying these words of caution towards Walton, because that's where it starts. If I could just help you avoid this pursuit that you're on, this pursuit of knowledge, this pursuit of your own understanding, this lofty ideal. And think about it. Whom did Walton leave for the sake of his mission? His sister. We see that he is forsaking relationship for what? For glory. And so we understand that the end of the story is, we've already read it. The end of the story is we need to really consider that which we're investing our lives in, what pursuits we are. In fact, the moral of the story has been highlighted again and again and again and again for us. And spoiler alert, The moral of the story is that the relationships that God has given you are to be prioritized above all other things. To the point which, when somebody hurts you, or they say things, are you going to put all of your weight in the things that were done or said? Or are you going to put the weight in the restoration of the relationship? Are we going to hold judgments against one another, or are we going to move towards reclaiming and redemption of relationship? So this week, though, let's ask this question. What would we do if we are Victor right now and we are being given the option here? What would we do? Do we create again? And if so, why? And if not, why? All right, that is it. We will see you guys next week.
Thank you.